Hello, everyone. I'm Captain Logan, and it's not Spawn Year. It is day 68 of my comic review video day calendar, and I am a little late on this one, so I'll have another one up for you later in the day. Plan catch up some, but this is the most recent comic that I will have reviewed on Not Spawn Year because it came out just a year and a half ago, and I don't expect that I'll have anything else later than this year. I guess it could happen if, kind of like this, I find something at a comic shop that I just decide to go ahead and throw on the stack. This is Batman number 109, which comes out in 2021 and is part of Tinian's short tenure on the book right after Tom King's run ended in a spectacular nosedive, the likes of which I have rarely seen. And I didn't review that when it finished because it was just hard enough to read and sit through. It was kind of like watching new Star Trek, where my review would be, what? And I had kind of the same thing with Batman Catwoman, or Catwoman Batman, strike that, reverse it, I think, from Black Label, where I'm like, I don't know if I even want to dignify this with a review, but I know you guys love watching me be a masochist, so maybe at some point I'll go back to that material and try to review it. I haven't talked about anything with Tom King past The Wedding. I don't even know if I got that far when I was reviewing that stuff closer to when it was coming out. But anyway, so the bar is real low with Batman right at this period, in my humble opinion, and this, in some ways, kind of gets us back to brass tacks a little bit with Batman, but is also way too modern in its sensibilities for my taste. I just have a hard time sometimes. Like you can do it, it can work, it can be interesting, but these real, and Snyder had this problem, King had this problem, now Tinian's got this. Just the real high tech kind of Batman stories, I have a hard time appreciating as much. Like, I don't think Batman, and maybe the story is about the fact that Batman doesn't work as well in a social media driven world, but I have a hard time not turning into an old man when I read a story like this, when I read a comic like this, and and not just go, wow, can we just make everything a period piece, or make everything with Batman feel like a more ambiguous time period, and not have everything driven by Twitter and cell phones and that sort of thing. But anyway, taking this on its own terms, this is, again, written by James Tinian, the fourth, with art by Jorge Jimenez. I think I read a little bit of Tinian right after Tom King, and I might have even looked at some of Joker War. I cannot remember now. It's not sticking with me really. And I remember thinking that because I'm pretty sure I read the introduction to Ghostmaker, and we're right in the middle of the Ghostmaker arc with this comic. And I remember thinking, this is okay. It's kind of what I always have with Tinian, where it's serviceable, it's entertaining enough, it doesn't stick with me. It reads kind of disposable. So I got this out of a grab bag from a comic store that I went to this last weekend in Des Moines, Iowa. Mayhem has two locations. I grew up going to the Ames location on vacation to visit family in Iowa, and I put that store in my comic shop documentary back in 2015, but I'd never been to the Des Moines shop. And quick plug for them, if you're ever in that area, go check out either or both of those shops, because the selection is staggering and insane, and wonderful guys working there. Go check them out. They really deserve your support, whether you're whether you're a comic person or a board game person. The selection, pardon me, and collection is amazing. But anyway, so I decided if I had a Batman comic in that grab bag, I would probably go ahead and throw it on the pile for Batmarch, and that's why I'm reviewing something this recent and something right in the middle of an arc. I would not have picked this myself, of course, because modern comics don't read as well by themselves, typically written so much for trade, and I will say this is a little bit better about that than some other things, but it is still part 3 in the middle of an arc, and I mean, quick aside, I don't know how to talk about new comics without constantly going to this, but I still don't fully understand why we're putting out so many flats month to month, and whether, and I wonder whether single issue comics really support the industry the way they used to. And I wonder, because I think a lot of people, maybe even the majority of people, both digital and in physical, read story arcs when they're completed, as opposed to keeping up with things month to month, buying the increasingly more expensive singular issues when it's getting, it's maybe not cheaper to buy a trade when it first comes out, but it gets easier as time goes on to just read everything at once. And I wonder if we could, even if singles are still supporting the industry by and large, I would love to do a research project. I should do this and look at the numbers between trade sales and single sales and see if it might make sense to, because this feels kind of antiquated to me. And this is coming from a singles collector, but I wonder if the industry wouldn't be stronger, and if we wouldn't be able to entice more people to come in and start reading if we did the kind of season arc thing with trades, and just put out like singular stories that are like 150, 200 issues, or pardon me, pages, or put out trades that overarching make up kind of a season of television, and train people to start buying more that way, not have to have the sheer number of series going on at the same time as we do, and if that might help, bolster the industry. I always wonder about that. But having said all of that, I do, even though every comic is not probably these days somebody's first comic, and the likelihood of somebody just going to a store and buying this issue sight unseen and reading it out of context is not as good as it used to be. There is enough bang for your buck in this particular issue, I think, and it's readable as well or better as all by itself as anything I've looked at in the last few years, so I certainly will give it that. It doesn't have the double shipping problem that we had at the beginning of Rebirth, where, and I don't think this stuff is being double shipped anymore, where you would buy 2 issues of the same book per month, but it felt like you were only getting 1 issue's worth of story, and we padded it with double page spreads, and it took 5 minutes to read. This took me a good 20-25 minutes to get through, and I will say part of that is because it's a little wordier. It's a little than maybe it should be. It's a little overwritten in places, I think, maybe padded more by language than by art, but it does feel like it's not a complete story beginning to middle and end. Certainly it is a chapter, but it feels like a beefy enough chapter, and I do certainly appreciate that. So we have this new vigilante named Ghostmaker, which is a very ominous name in the first place, and as soon as you hear Ghostmaker, you wonder, well, how can Batman build an alliance with this guy and think he can trust him and not expect that to immediately go south? He sounds like a serial killer, and in fact, his psychological profile is that nearly of a serial killer. He's not Dexter, he's not having to kill people to satiate an appetite, but he is a psychopath, and he calls himself that. It's a real interesting premise and setup for a character that is once again an interesting mirror for Batman. The idea that Batman does what he does because of his massive amount of empathy, at least from Tinian's perspective, where some people would look at Batman and say, you're as crazy as the villains that you fight and put in Arkham Asylum. Maybe you belong there, but the difference between them is, yes, he's got the certainly the kind of selfish obsession where it is to some degree a vengeance thing, where he's lashing out because of how he felt watching his parents die in front of him. But at the same time, he doesn't want to see that happen to other children, which is kind of the definition of empathy. And then you contrast that to this character. I keep wanting to call him Ghost Spider, Ghost Maker. Not a great vigilante name, by the way. It kind of screams we've run out of exciting, memorable names for superheroes, and so it's almost like we've got a Rolodex of like two next to each other of a bunch of different names, and one we randomize it, and one says Ghost and the other one says Maker, and we go, okay, we'll go with that. It's like a random. That's what I meant to say, not a Rolodex. It's like a random superhero name generator. So this guy does not experience empathy or fear, and Batman does have empathy. He's fueled by fear and uses fear in his war on crime, and so it's certainly an interesting contrast. So the idea is, and he explains this to Harley Quinn. I'm glad this is the issue of this I ended up reading, because we get a real good breakdown of his motivations, and he's certainly an interesting character on paper. He says that he is a psychopath. He easily could have just gone off and done whatever horrible mass manipulation plot he wanted to. He could easily go off and be another kind of standard villain in Batman's Rogues Gallery, where because he doesn't feel anything, he doesn't really care what happens to people, he could use that to his advantage, try to amass wealth that way, be a politician. He lists all these different things he could do with that. And what he's really interested in is a challenge, like a lot of Batman villains. And, sort of like the Riddler in trying to best Batman in a game of wits. In this case, he wants to be Batman's equal or be better than Batman in making the world a better place. Not because he, again, cares about people and wants to help anyone, but just because it's an interesting challenge. And this comic is all about various characters like this who are doing the right things for either the wrong reason or no sort of reason. And maybe not even always the right thing, but just ostensibly what Batman is trying to accomplish. People who want to, quote-unquote, fix the world. So you have that with Ghostmaker, who, as we see here in his discourse with Harley Quinn, has kind of his own Batcave. He's trying to kind of best Batman at everything. And by the way, he is working with Batman right now, so they're not totally at odds yet, although I assume that's going to happen after the backup feature when you see his background and the way he'll kind of torture and experiment on people who are in his mind, evil, and the kinds of people that he's trying to take down because of his, his kind of hobby of trying to fix the world. Excuse me. So he's got his own kind of Batmobile. He's got his own Batcave, and he's kind of trying to one-up Batman in every sort of way. And then we have this other character who's trying to fix Gotham City, named Saint, which is just a real on-the-nose kind of name. Get it? His name is Saint because he's not a saint, and there's like a dove because he's using that sort of iconography to twist things around, and he's a perversion of a saint. And anyway, this guy is kind of a Bond villain and has a little bit more of a typical big business, like evil tycoon CEO guy, where he wants to trying to manipulate people in or the city into thinking that this group that is not involved in a Scarecrow plot is working with them, so that and like kind of an evil terrorist group. He's he's trying to turn the city against them because yes, they are causing problems and being bad people, but he is just as bad or worse than them in trying to create this sort of peace. And so he blows up City Hall, blames it on them, and is basically trying to create a police state where he's got something of a RoboCop. I don't know if this guy's actually a robot. I don't think he is, but I was immediately reminded of something like that, or of like Overkill from Spawn. He's got this guy Peacekeeper 01. Tinian's sensibilities seem to be a little bit early 90s Image to some degree. And a lot of this stuff just doesn't fit great in a Batman comic to me. It's almost like it's other ideas that maybe he had for a creator-owned thing or something, and he's shoving them into Batman in order to like satiate people's desire for new characters, or to like make his mark on the Batman book, where he can create characters that will maybe last, maybe permeate, maybe be adapted in something, maybe make some of these issues key issues and worth something later on. I don't know what his motivations are for introducing these kinds of characters, and I'm not saying that I don't want to see new characters in comics. I certainly respect that, and I would... I salute him for doing that, I guess, but I don't know how well they fit in this context, in this material. I don't know how memorable some of them are. Again, Ghostmaker on paper, that idea is great. I don't like that name or the costume, really, I guess is the problem with that. But we have a really interesting Scarecrow plot here, and Scarecrow is barely featured because it's a lot more about this Saint guy who, again, is really typical, trying to use Scarecrow's plot to prove to Batman that the way, and we've been here 1,000 times before, that the way Batman is trying to solve the city's problems is ineffectual, or at the very least isn't sustainable. And there's some talk about how Batman might be effective if only he could get over his past. Kind of that question that I'm always talking about because it comes up so much in these stories and is starting to honestly get a little stale by this point. I kind of just want a good detective story with Batman at this point. Like we've asked this question 100,000 times with Batman, which is not just does he solve or cause more problems than he solves, but what is his true reason for fighting crime? Is he actually trying to change anything, make the world a better place, or is it an obsession? And this is, once again, about that, and Tinian has maybe a little bit of his own spin on it, but I do kind of feel like we've been here and done this a lot. What's new and what I like a lot, and maybe this is more focused on in the other issues in this arc, is the Scarecrow plot, this idea of... Again, this is about, psychology and manipulating people and enacting change, kind of perverting the Batman idea of intimidation, like taking what Batman does to the nines and making people think that you'll go farther even than you will, kind of like Batman does, right? Like he'll make people think that he's going to torture them or kill them, but he's not actually that brutal. I mean, sometimes he can be. It kind of depends on the version of Batman, of course, but it's about intimidation more than it is about follow-through. And Scarecrow is taking that idea, and I'm surprised that the phrase fear itself never comes up in this book, because the idea is he's put scarecrows all over the city. You see what I mean? Like there's a surprising amount jam-packed into this, this story. He's put scarecrows all over the city to make people, like physical scarecrows, to make people think that he's going to that he's got a fear toxin plot and he's going to set off his fear toxin all over the city again. And so it's making people panic. They're all freaking out and they're as afraid or more afraid than they would be if they were on fear toxin. So he doesn't actually have to use his toxin or do anything. It's just intimidation. And I think that's really interesting. That's the part of this that I haven't really seen before, is taking the MO of Batman and twisting it into of fear and intimidation, theatricality, and using that as a villain plot. I don't know at the end of the day, because the story's not over, what Tynion is getting at with that, if the idea is that Batman really needs to change his MO or not, because he tends to be a hero who refuses to change, and at the end of the day, he'll be in some way vindicated for what he's doing, at least in his own mind. This seems to be, and a lot of modern Batman books have been doing this lately, I think, what little I've been looking at, kind of responding to fan criticisms of this character in our modern day, whether it makes sense for Bruce Wayne to put on a costume and go fight crime as opposed to just using his immense wealth to enact social change. And I can't tell if this is how much of a response this is to that, because I've only got this one issue here, of course. And then, but I like that Scarecrow plot a lot. That was one of the things I latched onto the most. And then there's also, there's a lot of subplots here. There's also this thing about Poison Ivy and whether or not she should count as a psychopath. We talk about how her issue isn't that she doesn't have empathy, is that she cares too much. There's a which I don't agree with at all, and I'll talk about in a second, but she has this environmental terrorist friend that I guess she used to date years ago. This woman that shows up in again, I keep wanting to call him Ghost Spider, in Ghost Maker's lab. And this came out of nowhere for me because I haven't read the previous issues, so I'm like, Harley Quinn just happens to be talking about Poison Ivy, and then all of a sudden this woman shows up and is talking about Poison Ivy. But her whole thing is Poison Ivy is not a psychopath. She is trying to save the world. She, again, cares too much. And I'm like, okay, but it still kind of counts if you care more about plants than people, I think. Where like you still could look at it as just an obsession like anything else. Riddler is obsessed with riddles. Zsasz is obsessed with what he sees as people as zombies. Two-Face is obsessed with the number 2. Like, certainly I care about the environment and I want our planet to survive as much as I want people to, of course, don't get me wrong, but I think you're still maybe a psychopath if you can justify anything you do to human beings because you're trying to save the planet. It seems like still in that kind of psychopathic mode. And then we're comparing and contrasting with Harley Quinn, who we're told is a psychopath and has the same thing that Ghostmaker does. And interestingly, I don't know if she actually should count as a psychopath so much as some like from birth or anything, so much as somebody who snapped at some point, and Ghostmaker is kind of breaking her down and like psychoanalyzing her and trying to figure out how a character like her is capable of trying to become a hero, where she starts as a therapist and then she is working as the Joker's hench girl and just wants to prove herself to him, so she'll hurt anybody and doesn't really feel anything about it because she cares more about the Joker. And then now she's on this kind of road to redemption, and so there's this question as to what kind of a personality she really has. And he says, you're a psychopath, but I wonder what leads a person like you to suddenly start caring about being Batman's sidekick, which is what she's doing here, or what she's trying to do here. And my response to that is, I don't know. I think we're overthinking it. I think Tinian is kind of overthinking this and trying to like make up a psychological profile based on random choices that have been made in comics because a character got too popular. I don't see Harley Quinn as having a natural arc through the New 52 into this. I do like that she's characterized a little bit closer to the traditional Harley Quinn that I like, and she doesn't seem as much like the Super Genius here, but at the same time, I think the issue is when you have a villain character that gets too popular and we want to give them their own comics, it's difficult to sustain stories by just having them continue to be psychopathic murderers and sociopaths. So instead, we come up with some way to make them kind of superheroes in their own right, even if we want to label them anti-heroes. That's why Venom became the Lethal Protector. That never would have happened if he hadn't gotten as insanely popular as he was, and if we didn't think we could sell books based on him. I just feel like that's what's happened with Harley Quinn, and Tinian is retroactively trying to make it feel like a natural arc when it really isn't. But yeah, I didn't hate this. Like I said, I'm surprised by just how much story is here, really. Some of Tinian's sensibilities with Batman are mine. I can tell that he really likes the late 80s, early 90s, or maybe even into No Man's Land status quo for Batman. We've got Oracle back. I didn't know that had happened, where she's still, Barbara Gordon still has the use of her legs. She's not in a wheelchair, but she's gone from Batgirl to being Oracle, or maybe she's bouncing back and forth. I'm honestly not sure. But I don't know if Tinian brought that back himself, but I can just tell that in some ways he seems to kind of wish that he was still writing back in that period, which made me feel a little bit more at home here, I suppose. But anyway, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks a lot for watching. I will see you again a little bit later with another one, since I am late on this. And in the meantime, I was Captain Logan, and happy reading.